It began with a knock that shouldn't have meant anything. A polite tap, sharp and rhythmic, echoing against the door of a small townhouse at the edge of Maplewood Estates, a gated community known for its trimmed hedges, manicured lawns, and homeowners who smiled only when the cameras were watching. Inside, Amara Lewis, a 32-year-old black woman who had lost her sight 8 years earlier, reached instinctively for her cane. Her golden retriever, Bishop, stirred beside her, alert, protective, loyal. He was her lifeline, her independence, her eyes. When she opened the door, she sensed the silence first, then the subtle shift in air that often came when people didn't know how to act around her. That day, it wasn't a neighbor or a friend. It was animal control. Their voices were clipped, official, cold. Someone had reported her for keeping a dangerous animal in violation of HOA regulations. Her heart sank, confusion colliding with disbelief. Dangerous? Bishop had been trained since puppyhood, registered, certified, a licensed guide dog for the visually impaired. As the officer spoke, Amara could almost feel the smirks from behind curtained windows. She'd felt them before, when she first moved in, when her accent drew glances, when her cane clicked against the pavement in a place that valued perfection over humanity. But this time, something was different. This wasn't just bias. It was a coordinated act. And when the HOA board refused to listen, when they doubled down and threatened eviction, Amara realized she wasn't just fighting for her dog. She was fighting for her dignity, her rights, and a quiet belief that being black, disabled, and proud wasn't a violation of any rule, no matter how much this neighborhood wished it were. What they didn't know was that their cruelty had just triggered the biggest backlash of their lives. Before the chaos, Amara had chosen Maplewood Estates for one simple reason: safety. After years of navigating noisy apartments and inaccessible city sidewalks, she longed for quiet, a place where she could walk with Bishop without the constant fear of traffic or strangers' pity. The townhouses were small but modern, and the lease paperwork mentioned community values and inclusive living. It sounded perfect. Her first few weeks were peaceful enough. She learned to lay out her home by heart. The soft from the fridge, the feel of sunlight across her living room carpet, the distant murmur of sprinklers in the morning. Bishop adapted too, guiding her with graceful precision on her walks through the community. But it didn't take long for the stares to start. Some neighbors spoke to her with that careful tone, the kind reserved for people they didn't quite see as equals. Others ignored her entirely. And then there were those who whispered, who paused their conversations when she passed by. It wasn't just her blindness. It was her blackness. Maplewood's diversity existed mostly on paper. The HOA president, Carolyn Davenport, prided herself on maintaining standards. She sent emails about fence paint shades, garden lengths, and noise levels, but somehow never addressed a neighbor who muttered racial slurs under his breath. Still, Amara tried to stay positive. Bishop became a symbol of her freedom. He wasn't just a service animal. He was her guardian and her comfort. Children from nearby streets loved him, though their parents often pulled them away. Then came the incident. It started innocently enough. Bishop barked one morning when a lawn worker accidentally stepped too close. Within hours, Amara received her first notice from the HOA. The letter, written in legal-sounding jargon, accused her of harboring a potentially aggressive pet in violation of community policy. She called Carolyn immediately, her voice calm but firm. The president brushed her off. "We've had complaints," she said. "You'll need to provide proof that your animal is qualified to live here." Amara did. She sent medical documentation, certification papers, even a note from her doctor. But the tone of every response was the same: dismissive, patronizing, cold. Then, one morning, she heard the knock, the sound that changed everything. Animal control arrived unannounced. Someone from the HOA had claimed Bishop was a danger to residents. They tried to take him. And that was when Amara realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control, about reminding her she didn't belong. But they had underestimated her resolve and the powerful ally she was about to summon. The following week was a blur of paperwork, anger, and disbelief. Amara's phone became a lifeline. Calls to attorneys, disability rights groups, and even local news stations. She documented every interaction with the HOA, Every notice, every insult muttered under breath. Her best friend Diane urged her to stay calm. But Amara knew she couldn't let this go. She'd faced prejudice all her life. Teachers who doubted her, employers who overlooked her, strangers who spoke to her guide dog instead of her. But this was an attack on her identity and her independence. Word spread quietly through the neighborhood. Some residents expressed sympathy, though few dared to speak up. The HOA board met behind closed doors, pretending it was all just a misunderstanding. But Carolyn's emails told a different story, ones Amara eventually obtained through a Freedom of Information request. In one message, Carolyn wrote, "She's nice enough, but these dogs can be disruptive. It's not fair to others who follow the rules." In another, "We have to keep the community's image consistent." It was coded racism wrapped in bureaucratic language, a way to discriminate without ever saying the word black. Meanwhile, Bishop's behavior became subdued. The once playful retriever seemed anxious after the animal control visit, sensing Amara's tension. She spent sleepless nights stroking his fur, whispering reassurance, promising she'd protect him no matter what. Her story gained traction after she shared her ordeal on a blind community forum. Within days, advocates reached out. The National Federation of the Blind, Service Animal Legal Defense Fund, and even a local journalist became involved. The HOA doubled down, accusing her of creating unnecessary publicity. Carolyn threatened to fine her for publicly misrepresenting the community. But now, the narrative was out of their control. News outlets began reporting on a disabled black woman facing discrimination by a suburban HOA. The story ignited social media. Hashtags like #JusticeForBishop trended locally. Emails flooded the HOA's inbox. Sponsors began questioning their involvement in community events. Neighbors who once ignored Amara started to greet her differently. Some apologized. Others left supportive notes on her porch. A few even confessed privately that they'd seen Carolyn mock her behind her back. Still, the board refused to yield. They issued an eviction notice, claiming repeated violations of HOA regulations. Amara's attorney filed a federal complaint under the Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. The pressure mounted. Civil rights organizations began monitoring the case. And then, just when it seemed the fight couldn't escalate further, animal control made a shocking revelation. The officer would come to her house, lead to report to press, confirming that the HOA had falsely labeled Bishop as dangerous, using photos of an entirely different dog from a previous case. That was a spark. Overnight, national news stations picked up the story. People demanded accountability. Donations poured in for Amara's legal defense. Even the mayor's office released a statement condemning the HOA's behavior. But the board still refused to apologize. Carolyn called it a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The hearing took place in a crowded municipal courtroom 6 months later. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters whispered details as Amara, dressed in a navy coat, held Bishop's harness with steady grace. Her attorney presented evidence: the falsified complaint, the discriminatory emails, the eviction threats. Each piece hit the room like a thunderclap. When it was her turn to testify, Amara spoke softly but powerfully. Her words painted a picture of resilience, of what it meant to navigate life in darkness while facing a world that refused to see you. "I wasn't just fighting for my dog," she said. "I was fighting for the right to exist here without being treated like an inconvenience." The silence in the courtroom was heavy. Even Carolyn looked uneasy. When the verdict came, it was decisive. The judge ruled that the HOA had violated both federal and state anti-discrimination laws. They were fined heavily, ordered to issue a public apology, and required to undergo mandatory inclusivity and ADA compliance training. But the true moment of justice came when the judge added one final order. Carolyn Davenport was personally barred from serving on any homeowners association board for 10 years. The courtroom erupted in applause. Amara stood quietly, tears forming behind her dark glasses, as Bishop wagged his tail for the first time in weeks. Outside, cameras surrounded her. Reporters asked how it felt to win. She simply said, "It's not about winning. It's about being seen." The image of a blind black woman standing tall, beside her guide dog, became a symbol of strength across the nation. But behind the headlines, Amara remained humble. She returned home, still walking the same path, still guided by Bishop, but now with a renewed sense of belonging and a community forced to confront its prejudice. Weeks passed, and Maplewood Estates began to change. The HOA board was restructured, this time with diverse members and oversight from disability rights groups. Community values finally started to mean something real. Carolyn resigned quietly and moved away. Her house, once the epicenter of control, was eventually sold to a young interracial family, symbolic in ways that didn't go unnoticed. Amara's life, though calmer, would never be the same. She became an advocate, speaking at schools, workplaces, and conferences about accessibility, equality, and intersectional discrimination. Her story was shared widely, inspiring others who felt unseen to speak out. But not everything was easy. She still faced subtle prejudice, the kind that hides in tone or silence. Yet now, she faced it with the quiet strength of someone who had survived the storm. On the anniversary of the verdict, neighbors gathered in the community park for a ceremony organized by the new HOA board. They unveiled a plaque dedicated to inclusivity, engraved with a quote chosen by Amara herself. Equality is not about who fits in. It's about who we choose to make room for. Bishop, older but still loyal, sat proudly at her feet as the applause rippled through the air. As the sun dipped below the manicured lawns of Maplewood, Amara smiled faintly, knowing the fight had been worth it. Not just for her, but for everyone who'd ever been silenced, doubted, or dismissed. And while the world might still be learning how to see beyond color, ability, and fear, she'd proven that courage, guided by truth, can light even the darkest path.